I'd like to welcome everybody tonight. For those of you who don't know me, I see a couple of unfamiliar faces in the audience. My name is Jane Wild, and I am here representing the West Newbury Historical Society, who has hosted candidates nights before. Past president Dorothy Kavanaugh is here, and she had that honor. So I've never done this myself, but I mean, how hard can it be? So we have two contested races this year, and we have running for selectman Dave Archibald, who is to my left, and Frank Sisto to my right. And the for water commissioners, Dennis Unger to my left, and Bobby James to my right. We're going to make this as simple as possible. I figure that what we will do is give the candidates 5 minutes or so to tell us why they chose to run, what some of the issues are that they feel are facing the town, you know, prompting them to run, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. Is that agreeable to everybody?
Sure.
So I suppose we can just start from left to right. Dennis, we don't need to go in any particular order. Let me, do you want to come up here or sit here?
That'd be okay.
Is that okay? All right.
I didn't bring a speech. I just brought my resume so that I remember all the stuff I did. My name is Dennis Unger, and I moved to 12 Maple Street in West Newbury in 1989. And I'm a customer of the water department, and I'm a satisfied customer. I think it's a well-run system. I don't think we're faced down with a lot of the problems that the bigger, older communities are faced with, like 100-year-old systems that are failing and unmaintained and things like that. So we're kind of lucky in a way that we're not really facing down horrible challenges. But by profession, I'm a civil engineer. I'm a civil engineer by education, and I've been in civil engineering all my life. I'm recently empty nester, so I have a little more time that I'd like to spend with the community and get more involved in some way. And the reason why I thought about the Water Commission was because I have a background in that sort of stuff, and it's a place where I have the most to offer the community because of my background in water systems and things like that. I'm not long-winded, I'm fairly brief. The things that are most important to me are to have a well-maintained, cost-effective, safe water supply. I think that's obvious to everybody. And we are facing down some interesting situations because there's a lot of pressure to try new technologies. There's a lot of pressure to test places, to find new wells, to do all sorts of investing. But as a member of the Capital Improvements Committee, we really should be investing in things that have a return. And I do have an understanding of what constitutes a good investment in a long-range plan and what constitutes potentially experimental things where we're trying higher technologies. We're a very small community with a comparatively new water system. We are probably a target for people who want to try out new stuff because we're small enough and easy enough to sell. I'm a very hard sell. I'm not going to be an easy sell. And I want to see systems that work well, that have a return on investment, and that are not just being tested because we're an easy sell. On the Capital Improvements Committee, I've spent 5 years seeing the types of investments that the water system wants to make. I think they were good investments, but I don't have any way of knowing because we don't really get to see a lot of information on the Capital Improvements Committee. We just have a proposal that's already been decided. And so I would like to get more involved in knowing how our water money is being spent and how effectively it's being done. In the past, in addition to being a licensed professional engineer, I'm also a Mass Certified Procurement Officer, so I understand the complexities of public procurement, and I'm certified to actually perform those duties. I have 30 years of construction experience, 25 years of small business management, and I have a very expansive computer skills. I've done adult education for the last 7 years in Boston, where I teach AutoCAD and engineering subjects at Wentworth Institute of Technology. So I'm not really a beginner. I feel like I bring a lot of experience to the table. I did serve as the city engineer in the city of Haverhill in 1984 and 1985. We had our own water department there, but I got to see what happens to 100-year-old water systems that are out of control. But again, I don't feel like our system is out of control. I think we have a good system. I think people have done a great job trying to serve us well. And I'm available to also serve in this community. Thank you very much.
Just two things. I would ask when people come up to speak that they speak into the microphone. Past, we've had problems with not being able to hear at home. And also, if anybody has a cell phone, if you could just make sure that it's on vibrate, I'd appreciate that. Dave, you're up.
Good evening. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Jane, for organizing this little soiree. I'm Dave Archibald. Why do I want to be on the Board of Selectmen? West Newbury is a great town with great people. I'm so glad that my children were able to grow up here. In my 14 years on the FinCom, I've met with town employees, volunteers on town boards and committees, people from civic organizations, and I've been very impressed with the quality and dedication of all these people and their desire to make West Newbury a better place. And I'd like to contribute to doing the same thing. All towns in the Commonwealth are facing economic pressures to pay for expanding services and facilities that are sometimes mandated by the Commonwealth, but the Commonwealth isn't giving us the money. They're making us pay for fund things, but without state aid. In spite of that, West Newbury is actually doing rather well. I'd like to give a few examples. In 2014, if you read the Globe North section very recently, the average household tax increase in West Newbury was actually the 10th lowest out of 53 cities and towns. And this took place at the same time we were absorbing the cost from the Page School repairs and also absorbing the state mandated increased cost to the Pentucket assessment, the so-called two-step system. And so both of those things added a tremendous amount to the annual budget. At the same time, West Newbury's tax rate was actually not going up dramatically. So I think financially we're doing things rather well. Another thing, West Newbury is the only city in town, basically in the Commonwealth, with a fully funded retiree health insurance fund. Some towns owe hundreds of thousands. Some towns have an unfunded liability of millions. Boston's unfunded liability for their retiree health insurance is actually estimated to be $4 to $5 billion. This is a potential financial worry that West Newbury doesn't have to deal with anymore. It's been taken off the table. We might have to fund it a little bit periodically, but by being conservative and fully funding this early and fully, this is a worry we don't have to have anymore. Another good note, West Newbury's credit rating is superb thanks to our judicious spending and saving. If the town needs to borrow money in the short term, we'll be able to take advantage of very low rates that a town our size could only hope for. Very low. Everything isn't perfect, though, obviously. As our population is aging, we need to to keep our tax rate as stable as possible. We need to allow people on fixed incomes to maintain their homes. Another balancing act is, at the same time, we need to fund education at a level to make West Newbury a desirable place for young families. So how are we going to do this? By maintaining good schools, we help keep up the desirability of the town to new buyers, new home buyers. This ultimately can help seniors, as increased real estate values are increasing the values of one of their greatest assets, which is their home. Another solution to maintaining a stable tax rate is we want to assist what businesses we have. West Newbury is never going to be a big commercial center, but by encouraging small commercial interests, this does help to distribute the real estate tax burden, at least a little bit. So we want to encourage any commercial ventures we have, because those people are putting less demands on the tax rate. But as so much of our revenue comes from residential property taxes, over 80%, as a selectman, I will always remember we cannot overburden the homeowners. Encouraging or existing new agricultural and livestock businesses can also help with, besides helping the tax rate, can also help maintaining West Newbury's rural character. We're keeping open space open by using for agricultural, livestock activities rather than new building. I've talked a lot about finances now, but the town is more than a budget. I've said I value the people in the town a lot. I think I get along well with most people. And when people cooperate, more things can get done. I've been a scientist most of my life, and I want to get the facts and analyze them and avoid being emotional in response to issues. I promise I will not get my facts by reading the Star. Had to do that. I will be open to new ideas and open to discussing my thoughts on any issue to all people with the town. I hope you will all. I will strive to give my best effort to support the wonderful people of West Newbury. And as we're sponsored by the Historical Society, I'd like to say happy birthday to William Shakespeare tonight. It's his 450th birthday. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Frank Sisto, running for selectman. I'm going to have to pick and choose out of my notes here a little bit better. I timed this a little bit earlier today, and it took me about 25 minutes to run through all of this. I'm not going to put you through all that. So a couple of points. Just to give you a little bit of background about myself. My name is Frank Sisto. I moved to town about 6 years ago. I'm married with my wife, Stephanie, of 14 years. I have 2 little girls. My daughter, Audrey, is in the Page School, and my daughter, Bridget, is in Koinonia at the Congregationalist Church, and to be at some point at the Page School. So to a couple of points, I would love to talk about topics all night because I actually see a whole slew of them, but I'm going to keep things winnowed down to really kind of 3 areas. Oh, I'm sorry, I should explain to you too. My service to this point to the town has been on the Finance Committee. Unlike Dave, who's got a wealth of experience here for 14 years, I do not. My experience in municipal has been 1 year with the Finance Committee at this point. But to tell you the truth, with that 1 year, I think I've seen plenty to where I think we can make some certain definitive, decisive improvements. One of the things, and I think anybody who's come to any dealings with me, who's worked with me, will know is keenly aware and keenly interested of the taxpayer interest. One of the things that I don't see enough of in this building with any of my dealings is interest in taxpayer perspective on things. Now, I full well understand we got to provide for services. I full well understand we got to provide for the town, but the town may be doing well. A lot of taxpayers out there are not. To echo one of Dave's points from a little bit earlier, he's absolutely right. West Newbury is an aging population. If we take a look at the demographics of the town over the last 6 years, the population above 50 years old has grown 38%, while the population under 15 years old has dropped by 41%. It's starting to be an aging population. It's an elderly town, which now leads me to my other points. 3 different buckets I find very important. Taxes, I call it taxes part 1, communication, and taxes part 2. Taxes part 1, we need to spend smarter and we need to tax less. This is really what it boils down to. And the fact of the matter is that might be unpopular with some of the people in this room. That might be unpopular with a lot of the voters. But the fact of the matter is, this economy, no matter how affluent a town you are, people are hurting out there. Okay? Now, in regards to some of the taxing that's gone on, let's just take a look at the free cash position of the town. Going into the November 2013 town meeting, the town was sitting on $1.8 million of free cash. That number represents roughly 15% of the town's budget. Where that ranks out of 360 municipalities in the state of Massachusetts is the 14th highest percentage out of 360 municipalities. That's a no-joke number. Combine that with Community Preservation Commission, which going into that Midtown meeting was sitting on $1.7 million of cash. So you take those two figures together, that's $3.5 million out of a $12.5 million budget that the town is sitting on. Think about that for a minute. That's a big number. That's a really big number. You don't just arrive at that number overnight. You don't just arrive at that number through town meeting. So this is one thing I respectfully disagree with Dave on. Dave talks about bond rating. Yes, no argument. Dave talks about how well the town's run, to some extent, in areas. Nobody's being mindful of the taxpayer. And the fact of the matter is taxpayers have been getting taxed and taxed and taxed. As far as the other towns and municipalities around here, the only municipality around here that has a higher tax rate is Amesbury. Amesbury is an entirely different beast than West Newbury, so we won't examine Amesbury. So they're higher by far. You go down the road to Newbury, 2/3 the tax rate to what we have. You go to Groveland, it's less. You go to this town, it's less. You go to that town, it's less. We pay the highest taxes in the area. There's various reasons to that. To Dave's point, there's some things municipality can't do much about, because a lot of this is dictated from the state. But there are definitely things that the municipality has in its control, and we need to address those things. So that's one area I wanted to address, taxes part 1. I'm sorry, let me just finish off that thought. So what does $3.5 million sitting around buy us? Well, I'll tell you what it buys us. When I went through my first town meeting back in November, when I joined FinCom, I asked a bunch of questions. One of the questions I asked Dave was, as we come into our first town meeting, how many articles do we typically vote on? Do you remember what you told me on that? How many articles? Okay, Dave told me 10 to 12 articles, 15 tops. Okay, that's what he told me. First town meeting back in November, we had 28 articles to vote on. Now, some of that's administrative, some of that's fiscal. It's 28 articles. This town meeting at the annual coming up, we have 40 articles to vote on. Again, some administrative, some fiscal. Quite a lot fiscal. Okay? When cash is sitting around idle hands will go find a place to go. And I think this is what you're starting to see. So moving off of that topic, so that's taxes part 1. Another thing that's got to happen that has to improve in this town is communication. And that happens from the top down at every level. I'll include FinCom on this as well. Our website sort of works. Our communications at the town meeting is a bunch of muni-speak alienating a whole bunch of the taxpayers. People work hard during the day. They come in at night. They want to be given the information easy. They want to be given the information so they can understand it. The tone of the meetings are condescending. I've watched it happen over and over again, both sitting on this side as well as sitting on the other side. That's got to stop. The taxpayers are our customers. We should treat them as such. if the town meeting takes all night because everybody's got to get their opinion out, that's what happens. That's called town management. It doesn't have to end in 2 hours. Okay? We need to get people involved. We need to get them the information easily digestible. They make better decisions. They make better decisions, we have a better town. And there's a lot more on this, but in the name of time, I'm going to move on to the third topic. Third part of this, and this is more of a longer term view, but I think it's a real one, and I think we need to start addressing it. Taxes, I think, are one piece of several pieces that are starting to encroach potentially on property values of this town. I think we got a property value issue coming. And this is a long view of things, but I think it's coming. And when the anecdotes start adding up over and over, then it's no longer anecdotes, it's the way it is. Data point number 1 on this is a Boston Globe April 2012 article talking about the hottest real estate markets in Massachusetts. You know, these articles are popular, they come and go. And you've seen these, and you're going to see these at different junctures. Top 10 markets in Massachusetts in that article, 2 of them were Newbury and Groveland. I think Newbury was 4 and Groveland was 6. Now, what kind of jumped out at me is the town that's in between those 2 markets. Anybody want to take a guess? Right. So, people are driving back and forth to those towns to look at houses, and they're driving right through West Newbury. Okay, fine. Let's take it a step further. So, as part of that article, the next 10 is the honorable mentions list in regards to other municipalities' hot housing markets. You'd figure, okay, well, if those 2 towns are surrounding West Newbury is going to be in the honorable mention list. No, not in the honorable mention list. There's a valuation issue coming, and we might be already there already. So anecdote number 1 of others. Demographic trends of the town, coming back to that, the population is aging. Okay, the population that drives the higher prices are the double income families. The double income families are dropping precipitously. They're not coming through that door, and unless something changes, they're not going to come back through this door anytime soon. Okay? Who's going to be paying the higher prices? It's not going to be the retirees, or maybe some will, of course. Don't get me wrong, but we're going to have a valuation problem by a couple of measures. When we look at median income for this town, and we start trending it out years, median income is going to start dropping. That's the capability to pay the prices. That's the capability to pay the taxes. We need to get in front of this now before it's a big problem. Last but not least, and this is the one I really find most chilling on the real estate thing. I had a family, friends of mine, selling a house in Hilltop Circle over the summer. Great house. If you're a family and you're moving to West Newbury, this is what you want, okay? They put the house up on the market. They had what they call a broker's open house. And if anybody's familiar with buying and selling houses, what ends up happening is before it ever goes out to retail, to the customer, to people to buy, they have an open house for brokers. And the idea is to get the brokers in, and when the brokers come in, they take a look at the property and understand how to position it and discuss it. So early in the summer, they put this house out on Hilltop Circle. Agent schedules a broker's open house. Usually you schedule these things. You get anywhere between half a dozen to a dozen brokers. How many brokers showed up at that? 0. 0 brokers showed up at that open house. Now, the agent is a family friend of theirs. So she spoke with much more candor than the normal agent who's basically just pitching retail. And she said, brokers aren't showing up because nobody's interested in West Newbury. Now, I'm sure we can all sit here and say, well, geez, my neighbor sold his house in a month, and my neighbor sold his house in 6 months. That's fine. Look, it's partially an emotional decision, and you're going to have that. I got a neighbor that took 3 years to sell a house. I got a neighbor that took 4 months to sell a house. You're going to get that all over the map. The broker open house is much more telling. And the brokers are not coming because they don't see they see better fruits to sell. We got to get out in front of this. This can get ugly, and I think it's important. I completely forgot the top of this call. Why am I running? It's very important. Same thing I told FinCom. It's really simple to do good. Really is that simple. I really feel it's incumbent on anybody moving to a town and is going to be staying there for a while to get involved in the town. And FinCom looked like an easy way to do it. I have my undergrad in finance. I've always had an interest in economics and finance. It was an easy fit. About myself, I run my own business. It's a software consultancy. So I got economics and running my business. I do my accounting. I'm typically working local, or I'm typically traveling around the country. So I see a lot of places and how other places live and how other people handle things. So I get a pretty decent exposure to what's going on around the country as well. I have no larger agenda. My kids are here. Me and my wife made the decision we're going to stay here while they're here in school. And basically, I'm looking to make a better life for them here. I'm looking to make a better life for everybody. If I do good by them, I think I'm going to be able to do good by everybody. So, happy to answer questions and other issues. Hopefully, this helps you to earn your vote. Thank you for your time.
Mr. James?
Thank you. Hobble over there, we'll be fine. I think most of you know me. My name is Bob Janes. I grew up in this town. I've lived here pretty much all my life, not quite, but I went to school in this very building through the Pentucket school system. Spent 4 years in the U.S. Air Force, stationed in Anchorage, Alaska, and I did 24 years with the New Hampshire Air National Guard, going all over the world. I'm presently chairman of the Board of Health, presently a member of the Board of Fire Engineers. Hopefully at some point will be a water commissioner. I've worked for the water department in this town for 16 years, so I know pretty much what the system needs, what it doesn't need. I know a lot of the places that need to be upgraded. But one thing that does bother me is we have a very, very small water system. And the ability to supply water for the town of West Newbury, particularly with the Sullivan property being developed, you have the potential on Coffin Street with Boucher property, which could possibly be up for sale. That's 100 acres, which could be developed. You still got Bill Daly's property over here. You got Bill Daly's property down by the school. You've got the Chase property down on Main Street that all have the potential for being developed. We don't have the water that I can see right now to supply that. One of the biggest things we need to do, I think, is we need to find a viable source of water for the town of West Newbury. It's going to be expensive, but there are a couple of sites already that we've already drilled some holes in that I believe they are going to develop in the next year or so, or a couple of years. At least they're looking at the potential of doing that. But I'm not sure that's going to be enough. One thing I don't think we really want to do is I don't really think we want to be dependent on the town of Groveland or the city of Newburyport for our water. If we want to be dependent on those two entities, then we may as well close shop up here and let them run it. And I don't think that's the best or the wisest thing for the town of West Newbury. But again, I'll sit down, be quiet, and answer any questions.
Thanks, Bob. Do we have any other candidates running for office in the room that would like to get up and speak? Seeing none, I guess we'll open it up to questions from the floor. Glenn, you want them to use this microphone over here?
Please.
And you gentlemen can use this one. How about if we put this one over here? Because I'm going to sit in the audience and ask questions of my own. Anybody want to jump right in?
Is this on? Is this on?
I believe it is on, isn't it? It should.
Is this on, Glenn?
You wouldn't know.
Okay.
It's not.
Yeah, it's on.
Yeah, I would expect to hear something coming back, but I guess not.
Come on, people. Good Lord. Thanks. Oh, yeah, all right.
So I'm Deb Hamilton. I've lived at 227 Middle Street since 1975. I serve at the pleasure of the Selectmen as a member of the Mill Pond Committee, and I was a Conservation Commissioner for 20 years. I also am Secretary of the West Newbury Riding and Driving Club, and a director of Essex County Trails Association. So these are bodies that have interests in town, and I'm treasurer of All Saints Church. 3 years ago, All Saints requested funding from the town's CPA funds that are dedicated to the preservation of historic structures. That was in order to assist us in the repair and renovation of two, I would say, iconic buildings at All Saints. St. John's Hall, which is the big building with the Doric columns as you're coming from Newburyport, which was built for the use of the community by the Emery sisters in 1910, and the beautiful brick neo-Gothic church itself at All Saints, which is celebrating our 100th birthday this year. These are the first public buildings that anyone sees when you're coming into town from Newburyport. And to me, they set the stage in describing what West Newbury is all about, who we are, and what we value. So my question is this: do you see the wisdom of using the available CPA funds that are set aside or a part of the greater fund for maintaining historic structures as being applicable to church structures, as many other Massachusetts communities have done, including Newburyport? Or do you feel, as Mr. Archibald stated at the time when we sought help from the town to use CPA funds, that he felt that it was inappropriate to use town funds on a structure, that it somehow crossed the line between church and state? I'd like the opinions of the gentleman running for selectman, please.
That was my opinion and the opinion of the majority of the FinCom. I don't remember what the vote was at the time, and I still feel that way. I know Newburyport has used some small parcels of money to repair some of their churches. I am aware of that. It's just a philosophical thing with me. I cannot see using taxpayer money for the support of, basically, the support of religion. That's just, I have this total separation of church and state. I can't get around that.
Sure. It's kind of interesting. I would have to get my head around that a little bit. You know, I guess first and foremost, my gut would be to check the legality of it if there is any issue per se of using town money for that. In terms of philosophically, I understand and respect Dave's point. I guess I'd probably be of a little bit more broader view to that, in the sense of, you know, certainly certainly one has to be careful, I guess, of crossing that line of using municipal funds for, you know, churches, religious purposes. But, you know, to the other side of that too, I mean, sometimes buildings are just, or icons are larger than just, are larger than the religion itself. I mean, if it's a building that's iconic to the history of West Newbury, I mean, I think we would need to look at that closely. I mean, I don't want to come down without knowing more about it and saying yes or no, I would do one or the other. But I think we'd certainly need to be at least open to it. Which is kind of a non-answer, but I mean, I think, but really, that's kind of how I feel about it. I mean, I think we certainly need to be open to it.
I have a question related to CPA. For those of you that don't know, I'm on the Historic Commission, and also I serve as the representative to the Community Preservation Committee. And I was going to save this question for last, but I'm going to throw it out to everybody, because I would like to know from each of you, especially the two selectmen, what it is that you know about the Community Preservation Act and how it works.
I'll chime in. The Community Preservation Act was established by the legislature, I'm going to say 6 or 8 years ago. It allows a town to add a surcharge to their residential, to their real estate taxes up to 3% with a $100,000 cutoff. The first 100,000 is not the 3% is not taken on that, and then that money can be used for recreational purposes, historic preservation, open space. Am I forgetting one? Housing. And the state, at the end of the year, using money from real estate transfer taxes, matches to varying degrees, depending upon how many real estate transfer taxes they receive during the course of the year, sometimes matches the dollar. See, in other words, if West Newbury collected $150,000 on a good year, West Newbury might actually catch another $150,000 matching from the Commonwealth. That goes up and down. If the percentage of that a town takes is less than 3%, then the state has a formula for match. You don't receive quite as big of a match, or they don't receive a match on a second round, depending upon when the money comes in, quite as much. So if a town puts the surtax on of 3%, then they get more. They actually get a higher match at the end of the year from the state. The money that can be used for those several items. It has to be the community preservation committees in each individual town have to decide whether an appropriate request for their funding fits the criteria, and then depending upon the bylaws of the town, in our case, it would have to be approved by the Community Preservation Committee that it met the criteria, and then it would also have to, a funding request would also have to be passed by town meeting.
How do I follow that up? Well, look, Dave gave an excellent definition. I mean, I'll just fill in a couple of things around the edges to what Dave said. There's a $100,000 exclusion up front in terms of the matching funds. Once that's passed by, then, as Dave explained, there's different tiers to where the state will match its funds, and that varies from year to year. The state asks, I don't think asks, I think it actually mandates that you buy in if you're going to go the community preservation route to be part of the program for 5 years, so that a municipality can't cherry pick and say, well, this year you're doing a great job of matching, so we're going to jump in this year, and next year you're going to do a lousy job, we get out. So it's kind of a buy-in for 5 years, and then there's a renew, if you would, after those 5-year times. The definition of community preservation, to Dave's point as well, is pretty wide and varied. I mean, not to turn the terminology around, just to say preserving community, but that could be a pretty broad stroke. So take, for example, the library is considered part of preserving community as a municipal building. Hence, it's available for being a recipient of CPC funds. Page School is considered a historic building. I actually don't know the exact definition where Page School fits, but it fits under community preservation. Whereas Pentucket would not, Pentucket Regional would not. So certain things related to maintaining the upkeep and the usability of Page would fall under community preservation as well. There's a list of criteria. I mean, I have a big set of notes I usually have, but I didn't bring them with me tonight because I didn't want to fumble through them. But I got a document on that. I mean, if anybody ever needs or wants, I'm happy to distribute it in regards to what the definitions are for community preservation. And there's a certain set of criteria. And as long as the project meets those criteria, then it's available for the funds. And then, of course, it goes to the Community Preservation Board in terms of whether they want to release funds for it or not. And eventually to FinCom and down through the ranks before funding is approved for it.
I am an expert in AutoCAD design and with its technology, we adopt buildings from time to time, and we would actually draw up a historic preservation of the building, select the colors and materials, things like that. I was the design engineer for the Tenny Gatehouse. The Tenny Gatehouse preservation, that ultimately became the Tenny Museum in Methuen. And I can tell you, it's a big challenge to maintain and to preserve historic buildings because they're much more expensive than ordinary buildings. The reason why they're historically significant is because no one would ever build like that again because it's too expensive. And so for us to jump in and say, well, it's not very important, it'll never come back if it's gone. That I'll guarantee you. Okay, thank you.
Or did you? No?
Smart man.
Yeah.
Hi, Jen Solis, Daily News. Could the two selectmen's candidates please share with us whether they do or do not support the adoption of the Strong Chiefs Law for the fire department and why not? And the other candidates can weigh in if they want. Thanks.
I'm not going to touch that one.
I think ultimately I do believe in the concept of the strong chief. I think actually that the Board of Fire Engineers, the West Newbury Fire Department does an excellent job at the moment. So I think ultimately we have to go there. I'm not sure that we have to go there, in the next 6 weeks or something. I think that we should study it with all the available parties that have an interest in it and come to an agreement. I don't have a time frame on it. I think ultimately it has to happen, but I'm not in a rush to see it happen. I'd like to get. I don't feel fully informed enough to make a total decision on that. But I think I'm ultimately in favor of it, but I'm not. I'm not in a rush to judgment.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Solis, for bringing up an issue I haven't thought about in 6 months. To that point about the strong chief, I think I could talk for both Dave and I on this. When those articles came up in the mid-year meeting, FinCom had a lot of deliberations over that and had spent a lot of time struggling with that, and even at the end of the day, had a hard time really kind of coming to clean and clear conclusions as to what would be the better way to go. I would tend to say if I had to have my feet called to the fire to pick one, I would tend to probably favor it. Just more on philosophical terms of just in general, I mean, I find organizations, whether municipalities or whether corporate, run better with a strong, well-defined leadership versus kind of a scattered board of leadership. Now, that's not to say there aren't nuances that I don't realize related to the fire department, which might make it as such where maybe the fire board, the fire engineer committee, excuse me, would be a better fit. But I mean, again, when FinCom got presented the article at the Midtown meeting, it was in the 11th hour and 58th minute. And, like I said, I mean, I think I could speak for Dave and I both. I mean, we were all grappling with it pretty hard. We were asking the selectmen for answers. We weren't getting the answers we needed, and we felt very uncomfortable voting on it back then. And I think we ended up doing so, but I don't think it came from a point of knowledge and information. It came really more from philosophical values that each of us had, and basically applied it to the situation. So, I mean, I would tend to opt like Dave would. I mean, happy to look at it in far more depth, as long as we have access to people to ask the hard questions, and then maybe we can make a better judgment.
I have an opinion on everything. I'm in favor of that. The reason being, technology is advancing, and the equipment that we're being offered today is very, very highly advanced technical equipment, very expensive equipment. And we can't expect to continue to get these million-dollar vehicles and these things that are very specialized and have guys who are part-time committed. We need someone fully committed to making sure we're making the right decisions. When there's a fire in my backyard, I want someone to know there's a 20-foot wide driveway, 14 feet high, cut clear, that takes a 100,000-pound flatbed, and they could deliver any piece of equipment possible. I don't want them guessing and bringing the wrong equipment, okay? And I'm in favor of that.
I didn't want to get into this tonight because last night was bad enough, but I didn't want to get into it tonight. As a member of the current Board of Fire Engineers, we have discussed this very question at length and in depth. We have come up with the feeling right at the moment that at some point in time, I believe Dave is right, we are going to need some type of full-time personnel. My own personal opinion, and I speak only for myself, is that I do not believe that we need a full-time chief before we have a couple of live, warm bodies around that can do some of the other stuff, because you still have a chief that's going to sit there and say, what am I going to do? He's all by himself. I think you need to have the working people, whether it's 2 people on during the day, 3 people, whether you pay them per diem, you pay them a 40-hour week, that needs to be thought out. It needs to be thought out very carefully, because obviously you folks are the ones that are going to wind up paying the bill. But I don't think we need to rush into something. I think we need to sit down, take our time, look at it, study it, because we all feel that eventually this is going to happen. I don't believe yet that the call volume in this town is there where we have to have somebody 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We seem to be manning most of the calls very well with what we have. But again, this is something that I really think that between the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Fire Engineers, they need to sit down very rationally, very calmly, and think about it and discuss it. And, if it takes 2 years, if it takes 5 years, we don't need to run into it, jump into this in 20 minutes. That's a bad mistake.
I have a question for the 2 selectmen candidates, and back to the CPC. I, among many others, I was not the kingpin, but I was a worker in getting the CPC through in town, and I think it's a good plan, and I'm glad we did it. I did 2 years in a row support reducing the percentage that we surcharge because I felt that if for no reason, even if it wasn't a good idea, it failed. 1 year it was withdrawn, the second year it didn't pass, but it was a close enough thing, is because the committee and the process and the rules under which they are organized didn't seem to be working too well, or the community wasn't buying into it because they weren't coming with funding issues. So I participated in the cutbacks mostly just to try to get their attention. And Mr. Sisto mentioned tonight the balance in the fund, and I find that that's a perhaps an unhealthy situation. Back at the time it was originally passed, it was Dave behind me was a player, and Ann O'Sullivan, and I forgive those who I can't remember right now. And I suppose everybody was idealistic then. We tend to be when we want to pass a new law, regulation, policy, or this or that. And I read it in the state law and studied it, and so when I was a supporter of it, I was a supporter of it in the idealistic fashion. And that is particularly borne itself out in later years in regard to historic preservation, and some of the monies that have gone from CPC into, I should just rather not even use the term, the elementary school building, and whether it's historic or not, but to ask for money to fix a floor or improve a HVAC system, to me, because of some tenuous connection to historicity, I guess is a word, that's a far reach from the idealism that I imagined that I had at the time for historic preservation. So what it does, I guess, is it creates a fund. You basically are pre-taxing people, and then you're using the money that ideally we have set aside for special kinds of uses in a mundane use without having to go back and do the hard work of making it come out of the tax bill. And that's a very convoluted end result from what I think the town voters saw. I'd like to have your comments on my thoughts on that.
Want me to go first for a change? Okay. Yeah, John, you bring up some excellent points. And I agree with you. I mean, I agree with you on a lot of fronts with that. It's basically turned into a slush fund for whatever. And, you know, unfortunately, a lot of good ideas, and, you know, we don't have to just look at this town, we can look at the federal government. You know, there's a lot of good ideas that start out as one thing and then morph into something entirely different and become a bigger and uglier and messier situation. I have sat in on the FinCom meetings for a year, and I can tell you that just about, well, I better not make a blanket statement like that. Often, can we pay for this out of CPC? And it might be, again, something mundane and arcane to fixing a floor, fixing this, fixing that. And, you know, it starts feeling really disingenuous and starts feeling kind of a little filthy after a while, basically, because what ends up happening is, you know, it's clear this is not the intention of what this was, and it's now turning into some other different use. I think this also comes back to the fact we're looking at a fund with $1.5 million in it. And, you know, it needs to be spent, and there's only so many things that you can go ahead and restore. The whole thing's gotten out of whack a little bit. You know, in terms of solving that, you know, I wouldn't mind seeing the contribution get ratcheted back from the taxpayer and put some money back in the taxpayer pockets. I wouldn't mind seeing maybe a more narrow definition of how that money is used. I don't know what the right answer is, but it's worthy of discussion.
At the time, I believe 2 or 3 years ago, when we did try to lower the percentage, I was actually in favor of lowering the percentage because I thought we were building up too big of a pot of money, and the number of proposals that were going into the CPC was relatively limited, and I was a little perturbed at the quality of the proposals and just the amount of money we were collecting versus how much was actually going out. Very little was going out, very few proposals, and we were taxing people for this. A couple of things have happened, though. The legislature, for once, their infinite wisdom was actually, there was a little wisdom. They have expanded the criteria to allow, for example, a property that the town already owns to be used. Say we wanted to put housing on it, or wanted to make it a recreational facility or whatnot. That property could wanted to put just to pick something, the basketball courts, for example. If someone in the past, the town would have had to buy new acreage and use CPC money to do that, and then put the basketball courts on that particular spot. They couldn't put use previously owned town land and use CPC money to put the basketball courts on that. So the legislature has expanded the criteria, just loosened it up a little bit so that it's not quite so stringent. So I'm feeling actually a little better about the CPC in terms of, perhaps we're stretching the criteria a little bit more than what we like, but there is always, I don't think that any proposals are being passed by the town or signed off on by the selectmen or the FinCom or whoever that wouldn't pass muster in some fashion anyway. In other words, I don't think we're getting second-class proposals. Well, it's CPC money. A good portion of that comes from the state, so it's less of our tax money. We can use it on a lesser quality project. I feel pretty strongly. I don't think that's happening now. So and the fact is we're still getting the matching money. I think I've changed my opinion back. Instead of lowering the percentage, which I was in favor of, I have to admit, a few years ago. Now, because the criteria is a little bit looser, even from the state's aspect, I feel that we are going to be able to use those monies, and they're not totally untouchable. So I feel better about the CPC.
Can I do I'm sorry. Yeah, is it okay? Okay. Yeah, I just want to do a follow-up to Dave's point, and he was talking about the quality of projects. And I'm going to leave quality of projects aside, but here's something, and I mean, the selectmen have heard me talk about this ad nauseum, and I'm going to bring it up again because it's something that I'm fairly dug in on. Here's the problem of what ends up happening. Something like the library windows article, okay? We got an article out there for $112,000 to replace the windows in the library. 35 windows that need to be replacing. I am going to hold off now because it's a whole discussion in and of itself whether they need to be replaced or not, because that's a whole other thing. What I will talk about is the economics of it, though. The economics of $112,000 into 35 windows is roughly $3,200 per window. I don't know. There's some people in this room who've had their windows replaced in their houses or their businesses. Did you pay $3,200 a window? Really? They must have been awesome windows. I understand, and there's some danger in that because it's historical, the price gets artificially inflated. And also when the people and the bidders understand that this is going to be bid with matching funds from the state, somehow the whole process gets a little bit out of whack. So I think there ends up being a bit of perverse incentives that end up happening off of this. I'm not saying whether, again, I'm not going to touch the issue whether the windows need to be replaced or not, but I want to talk about the economics of it. And you're looking at $3,200 a window.
I like to totally disagree with that. If I'm a contractor, there's no way. Well, I'm gonna bid $2 less than what the engineer's specs were. You're not going to get the job. Why on earth would you? If you're in a bidding process and you want to get the job, you want to maximize your profit, granted, but you're not going to get the job if you're thinking, well, I'm going to bid high because everyone's going to bid high. You're not going to get the job.
Well, gentlemen, we can talk about this later, but I'd be happy to speak.
Municipal is a
both of-
different beast than the free market.
I would be happy to speak with both of you after the meeting and educate you with regards to historical preservation and why it does cost so much. But moving on, does anybody have any other questions?
Yes.
Yes.
I'd like to go back to the CPA funding. My name is Bill Simmons. I've been a resident in West Newbury for 34 years. Past retired lieutenant from the fire department, a former chairman of the Board of Health. I have to tell you that the way that we were treated last year in bringing forth a CPA funding proposal that for the first time that I can remember didn't involve some type of municipal project. This was in fact a private institution that came to the town looking for support to restore historic buildings, to preserve historic buildings. And the way that we were treated, particularly by the Finance Committee, has left an indelible imprint in my mind. We had the chairman of the Finance Committee who chose not to understand the constitution of this land in terms of the First Amendment and separation of church and state. It just terrifies me to think that your own personal opinion as to how you think things should be overrode what the law is.
I will, if you recall, the vote on town meeting was approximately 120 to about 15. It was overwhelmingly turned down.
That's not the way I recall the vote. But we were dead before we got out of the box because of the way that we were treated by the FinCom and personal vendettas.
I don't have a personal vendetta at all.
As the moderator, I would like to see us, I understand the CPA is a big issue with a lot of people. I know with Bill, it was a concern. I feel some of those same things, but really, I think that,
A couple of more comments.
okay. 'Cause we need to
I
move on.
have never seen a CPA project in this town that did not involve some type of an improvement to a municipal building. Is that your opinion, that that's the only use that should be made of these funds?
No, I don't think that's the only use of those funds. I mean, it's one valid use depending on the context, but by its nature, it is community preservation. By its definition in the title, that can have look at various. I mean, obviously, got to play within the rules of what that means. But besides that, I mean, that's going to have various visions and definitions for various people. I mean, community preservation, can that be potentially Page School? I mean, I could see the argument for that. Can community preservation be the library? Of course. Of course, I could see the argument for that. Can community preservation be potentially a church? I could see the argument for that if it's iconic and part of the history of the town. You know, I mean, it's always a case-by-case basis, but no, it's not just about restoring municipal buildings.
I'd like to ask you one further question,
Uh-oh.
please. You made a point that resonated with me earlier in your presentation in terms of people not being able to get their say on town meeting floor. Are you in favor of retaining the current moderator?
No.
Thank you.
But do understand that that is an elected position, and she has run unopposed for an awfully long time. This is where it comes back to the taxpayer and the townspeople, is if you want to see a change, people have got to get involved.
Thank you.
Thank you to everybody for their comments about CPA, but I think it's probably time that we moved on. I had another question myself, and it's historical. Yeah, but better than the last one. Sorry, Kippy. This goes out to everybody. Are you aware of plans to put a branch of the Haverhill Bank on the lot on the corner of Maple and Main next to the barber shop, replacing the home currently occupying that lot? In your opinion regarding this? Dennis, you already know.
You start on this.
Microphone.
I received my legal notice today. I'm in a butter, and I knew that they had to get variances. It's very, very similar to the variance that they tried to get immediately across the street from us. You know, I want to see commerce in our downtown, but I don't want to see 12 cars stacked out in front of Maple Street. I don't want to see 12 cars stacked outside of Maple Street. The lot is deficient in size for a drive-through, and I don't think it's a good application. The issue of a historic building, unfortunately, we have a lot of historic buildings and a lot of historic features in our community. I think our bow window is a historic feature, and it's treated that way. Yeah, you can spend $3,000 on windows when they're historic. And if we put in vinyl, if we were to put in vinyl, it would be conspicuous. It just wouldn't look right. And so we have these historic buildings, but we don't have a policy for them. And so they're not declared historic. If we go into other communities where you have a 300-year-old building, it's already been declared historic before someone buys it. So it's very hard to jump onto that person who buys a building that's not declared historic and tell them what to do. So it's a dilemma.
I have to say, I was just vaguely aware that something might happen, but I hadn't really known that that was the case. I think you'd have to see the proposal. I have no idea what they're planning to do, or the scope, or to tear down a new building, or I have no idea what's planned. So I can't give you a good comment about that. I do feel if we have to have, if we have to have some business, it has to be in the commercial district. However, I certainly wouldn't be in favor of a big modern building there at all. I have to see that. I just don't know what the plan is going to be, so I can't comment any further.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm in the same boat as Dave. I mean, on FinCom, we've heard the whispers of this coming, but neither of us have seen any plans on it, know any of the details. I mean, philosophically, I'm for it. It comes back somewhat to my topic about communication, in the sense of, we as a town, we need to be respectful of the history and the charm of the town, but similarly with each generation that comes in, I mean, the town's going to move forward in one respect or another, and whether we like it or not, at some point there's going to be some commerce coming to town, and potentially it's a good thing. Also, too, I mean, it would, philosophically, I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing some commerce come to town, if for nothing else, to sort of have a center of town where people come to. I mean, basically, unless you have kids and you're on the ball fields, there's not too many chances for people to come together in town for much of anything. And, we talk about community preservation and throwing money around. How about we build community? How about we have some events? How about we do things to get people together and talking to each other? Because we don't. And, we have tremendous amount of resources in this town, and we got tremendous amount of people who want to get involved and build something like this. They need some direction. We don't give them any direction. So I don't want to say commerce to necessarily be the end-all, be-all to building community, but I think it's a step. I think it's a step in the right direction to have places where people aggregate.
Sitting in the middle of Whetstone Street.
A little. My particular feeling on this is, number one, and I think Debbie would probably agree with me, that everybody in this room has the right, an inalienable right, as far as I'm concerned, to sell their property. If you buy that property and want to do something with it, as long as it's within the confines of the business district or whatever, that should be your right. If that building was declared historic, so be it. Then you can't do anything with it except keep it as a historic building. To my knowledge, it's not. Therefore, Mr. Leary had every right to sell it. The bank has every right to buy it and do with it as they see fit. I don't believe at this point the town has any right or authority to step in and say you can't do it. That's my own personal opinion of that.
I'd like to clarify something for the audience with regards to comments that have been made about houses being historical. We have 330 houses in the city, in the town of West Newbury that are historically relevant. But what people don't understand is that just because you have an inventory sheet for a piece of property in town, and as I said, we've got 330 of them, and they are scattered all over town, and Leary's is one. One of the things that we don't have is a demolition delay bylaw. And the other thing is that people really don't understand the difference between having an inventory sheet where the property is on an inventory from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Historical Commission and what you can do with it. So Bob is absolutely correct. The only way that we could keep things from being torn down would be to have a demolition delay bylaw. And that would be another question that I would throw out to you, to the, anybody to answer as to what your feelings are about a demolition delay bylaw.
In for a penny, in for a pound.
Yeah, absolutely.
Personally, I'm not particularly in favor of a demolition bylaw, at least to the extent the Newburyport's gone. I think that's ridiculous, a year before you can do anything. Chet Colquitt's house, for example. It was my understanding from several realtors that I have talked to that that was not worth putting the money into to save it. It would have cost more to save that building than it was worth. And to put the owner a year out, 6 months out, before he can do anything with it, I think it's a, kind of a bad policy. I mean, I think they have the right, or should have the right, at least the town should have a right to see if it can be repaired or whatever in some respect. But if the repairs are going to cost more than it's worth to tear it down and build a new one, then dragging off holding off the demolition for a year to come up with the same result, I think is, first of all, you've lost the sale of the property, because with that kind of a bylaw, who's going to buy something? It's just, again, my personal opinion.
In regards to just to come back to Haverhill Bank just for a moment, Bob summed that up really well. Coming back to the demolition bylaw, I would have to see it, but I guess philosophically I'd probably be against it. What ends up happening with these things is, they just become an impediment for the sake of being an impediment, without really, while somebody scrambles to find some other reason to make an impediment. And, there's a lot of these things have just gone far afield of what they were ever intended for originally. Now, and I can't envision what it would be, but if somebody came to me with a law that just resonated with me and said, that makes some sense, and I can go along with it, great. But you mentioned Newburyport's, what, a year before you can do? That's insanity. Who the hell would touch the property? So I'd have to see it. Philosophically, I'd probably be against it.
I actually would totally agree with Frank.
Dennis?
I'm not too familiar with demolition bylaws. I'm very familiar with the establishment of historic significance in a building. And unfortunately, I think we have an awful lot of buildings that have not really been given the attention they need to be declared historic. If we have an interest in them, then people who are shopping around for a historic building know where to go and where to look and how to find what they're after. Because no one would look at that property at the corner of Maple Street and think, gee, that's an ideal opportunity to restore a 300-year-old home, because they don't know it's 300 years old. They'd have to be halfway to the point of buying it before they knew what level of detail was remaining inside, what kind of structural issues were at hand. And it is very complicated. But again, if we declare properties historic, people interested in historic properties will buy them. If we don't declare them historic, then they go to the highest bidder, and nobody at the bank wants to wait a year, that's for sure. But unfortunately for them, I think the variances are going to be tough to get.
It's going to be tough. Other questions? Christy, you've had your hand up for
I got here late, so if the first part of my question is been asked or redundant, please go to the second part. You're both coming from FinCom. With few exceptions, the majority of people think our taxes are too high and that they continue to go up. And with your FinCom background, what would or could you do at FinCom going forward or in the past that could change that perception? That's the question that if it's already been asked, I'll go to my second question. So part one is, what would you do differently with FinCom to change the perception that our taxes just keep going up, and they've gone up a lot, and we never seem to get our money back or hold down the fort? We seem to pass everything that comes in front of us. Anything that's proposed seems to go through, with very few exception. So that's part one. Part two is, if either of you become selectmen, what would you do different to differentiate yourself from the selectmen you've seen on the board for the past decade? I'd like to know what you would do different as a selectman. I don't want this to fall.
Just in terms of what are our taxes doing? If you look at the budget that was you can look back at 2 or 3 years, for example, but let's just look at the budget that we're going to propose for the next coming fiscal year. The town side of the budget is going up just don't hold me to it exactly, but 0.5%. So way less than 1%. Whereas the school side of the budget, which is slightly over half of the entire town budget, is going up approximately 5%. So you average those two numbers together, you get 5.5, and you divide it by 2, and you get an increase of about 2.5%. Almost all the increase in the town's budget has been attributable to the Pawtucket district. That's just the way it is. Part of it is the way the state is assessing school districts and the individual towns in the district is unchangeable. We don't have any control over that. The minimum contribution has gone up substantially this year just to the town, and it went up substantially the year before.
Dave, can I clarify?
Yeah.
Just to clarify my question, just what that you could control, would you or could you do differently so that we're not just saying yes to everything that gets put in front of us and voting for it, so that we're being more fiscally responsible?
Okay.
Just not what you can't control, but strictly what you can control, because I don't feel that we've been as fiscally responsible as we should and really tried to, keep a tight budget. I feel like somebody comes with a proposal and it's yes, 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 and with very little resistance, everything gets passed. So only please address what you could control.
Okay, but there is a perception, and I've heard it from a lot of people, that everything that comes to town meeting or comes to the FinCom or the Board of Selectmen sign off on every spending proposal. Part of that, and to a certain extent, that is true. But there is a reason behind it. Is the ones that didn't make the cut actually get dropped, or the proponents of whatever they wanted to spend the money on say, well, the FinCom is completely against it. The Board of Selectmen are completely against it. We're not even going to let's just drop it. So a lot of the negative proposals don't actually even make it to town meeting floor for that reason. So it looks like we're just rubber stamping every item, and every single thing gets passed. But a lot of the ones that have a negative vibe to them don't see the light of day. So because they probably just people decide, well, I'll try it later, or I won't try it at all, because if they don't like it, nobody's going to like it. So that's one thing. How do we make it? How can we improve things? I think we can. For example, what do we do about personnel and hiring in the town? It hasn't been that the town has been hiring new people. That's not been happening. Salary increases to town employees have not been outrageous by any stretch of the imagination. 2% here or there. It's been very, very limited. So how do we address keeping at least the town side of the budget from going up? And as I said, it barely went up at all. I think we can, in terms of maybe not personnel issues, but on purchasing, even get things at the margins, small things, but they add up. If we could do better with, say, something like bulk purchasing, if we could buy utilities from on the open, rather than going with the conventional national grid supplier of electricity or natural gas. If we search out and get fixed contracts for items like that. If we can do just better on buying bulk for lots of departments in the town, I think we can improve things in that fashion. It's a hard thing to do, though. I don't disagree. It does seem like taxes keep going up, and it's I don't want that to happen either.
Frank, want to take a stab at it?
What was the original question? No, I heard it. I wrote it. That's why Dave went first. I was writing, and he was nice enough to go first. There's a lot of good meat, actually, in what Dave just said, but there's just some pieces here I got to address, little bits and pieces here and there. To the argument of the taxes go up roughly 2.5% year over year, the bulk of which comes out of Pentucket, and the much smaller portion coming out of town. That's accurate, but it's a little bit of a misnomer, too. I mean, we had a little bit of windfalls along the way that helped us keep that number down. So, yes, the administrative expenses on the town side that we can control did only go up by 0.5, but we had a couple of windfalls along the way that helped us keep that there. Now, there's an argument, do you want to include the windfalls or not? That's a point to be debated, but we had some help along the way keeping that number down. There are big bunches of this which at the town level we can't do much about. The Pentucket aspect of it is over 50% of our budget. I think it's about 55% of the budget. And FinCom, the town can't do a lot about that. However, the selectmen could do something about that. And the selectmen could get involved at the state level and get involved with the state reps to go back to the state to do something about this. Because this arc is unsustainable in what's happening with the school taxes, with the tax level at the school. On top of that, to Dave's point, the state, he's right, the state has actually recalculated what our contribution is, and in doing so, the state has deemed us a more affluent community. By such, being the more affluent community, we pay a higher percentage in than we have in the past. So it's kind of even a further cruel joke, because among falling enrollment in West Newbury, our contribution percentage is going up to the Pentucket, school system. So it's an unsustainable model. But unfortunately, at the local municipality level, Pentucket really can't be addressed much. It's got to happen at a higher level, and we need to do that. To another point that Dave has mentioned, it looks like that we rubber stamp everything, but you don't see the list of things that don't make the cut. Well, I've been on FinCom for a year. I can't really count on 2 fingers what hasn't made the cut. So, I mean, if Dave can want to outline a couple of those, that'd be great, but I can't recall. Certainly possible I might have missed those meetings, but I've been at most of them. So no, most things do make the cut, and most things do get voted on, and it's only on a very rare occasion that something doesn't make it to the floor. So I'm going to respectfully disagree on that. What FinCom can do to change the tax perception is help educate the voters. And that doesn't come from just FinCom, that comes from the selectmen, that comes from basically all the boards, is make this easier for people to understand. You go to a town meeting, everybody speaks muni-speak. If you don't speak muni-speak, you don't know what's going on, and you're trying to do the right thing. You're trying to get involved. You're trying to make the vote. You're trying to make an informed decision. But everybody's talking a different language. If you don't sit on one of these boards, how do you know? And it's no fault of your own. You got lives. You got jobs. You got things to do. We need to make this easier for townspeople. We don't. And it's easy to do. There's a couple of low-lying things we can do, some of which has been incorporated in the town booklet. I will give credit where credit is due. You guys are going to be seeing a glossary. That is Dave's initiative. Nice job on it. It's a start. The town website needs to work. The distribution list for the automatic distributions. There's things you could sign up for so you can get meetings for the minutes for the meetings. They don't work. I signed up for them in November. It's April. I've yet to receive one. On and on and on and on. Other things that happen, and this is going to be a point of contention, and I don't want to take too long on this, but one of my initiatives was a spreadsheet that I built for the November meeting, which is an article monetization summary. And what that article monetization summary was to outline for each of the taxpayers how much it would be to come out of their pocket and pay for each of these individual articles that they're voting on. When I first initially proposed it, FinCom was very tepid on it. Dave did finally step forward and embraced it. FinCom fell in line. It went into the Midtown meeting, was a popular item. Dave came to me the last time around and asked me and said, okay, well, can you do that again, Frank? Yeah, sure. So I went ahead and did that. Now, I'm getting the final look of that, and I'm noticing some of the key information has changed. And the key information that's changed is there is a column on there, the last column on the far right. You're going to see page 6 in the annual booklet, and it says there's going to be 2 columns. One is going to say fiscal year 2015 tax impact. In short, what that means is in the article monetization, that taxpayer impact, that's the future taxes. Most of those items are going to be 0, because when you vote on an article, the articles don't come out of future taxes. Not normally. They come out of taxes that have been taken in the past. All right? Next column over, fiscal year 2014 taxpayer impact and other taxes. That's what the original column said when I submitted it. When I submitted it, I went over that spreadsheet with Finance Director Warren Sproul for 2.5 hours, item by item on the numbers. The numbers on the whole are largely untouched, but the naming of that column has changed. The naming of that column used to be fiscal year 2014 taxpayer impact. It's changed now to comments. Now explain to me how comments properly illustrates what that number represents when it used to say taxpayer impact before that. And if Dave wants to answer that, I'd love to hear it.
I'll be happy to answer that. One thing that FinCom tries to do is, within reason, be as accurate as we can be.
What's more accurate than taxpayer impact?
Gentlemen, one at a time, please.
And we were not able to get your input on that particular item on that meeting. But the free cash account of a town obviously includes unspent tax revenue. It also includes fines and interest. It includes unspent grant monies that were more than was spent. It includes a lot of things. It includes, theoretically, unless the balance went down to 0, some taxes that might have been collected on a boat excise tax from 7 years ago. It's not strictly the free cash account, although a lot of it unquestionably is taxes. It doesn't. It's money that has been collected in the past for we don't know even how far back, and it's not just taxes. So I think it's unreasonable to say that if we're gonna buy I don't know what, say a police cruiser, and it comes out that it's going to cost $15.75 per household for that particular item in taxes, it's actually that money is not coming out of people's pocket. It might have come out. Some of it might have come out of their pocket 4 years ago, but it's not. It hasn't come out of. It's not coming out of their pocket in the future, and I think it's not I think we're being disingenuous by saying that.
Folks. Ma'am?
Actually, it's 8:30. We could actually talk about this the rest of the evening, and I'm not sure that that's what everybody had in mind.
I've never unfortunately
would-
answered Christie's question. The second part of Christie's question was how. But I want to answer your second
Can
question.
we do that and do it in a timely fashion?
I'll do it in 2 sentences.
Okay.
Okay. The second part of Christie's question, it's Christie, right? Yeah, I'm sorry. How would I differentiate myself from selectmen of the last 10 years? I can't speak to 10 years ago. I can only speak to what I've seen here in the past couple of years, where I've been more involved and working with folks. I have heard a lot of good logic. I have heard a lot of good rationale. Dave and I have had conversations in private. Philosophically, Dave and I are really not that far apart, honestly. And I mean, I won't get into those discussions, but we're not. But when it comes to the votes, and when it comes to putting your money where your mouth is, I will vote my convictions within the context of what is in the taxpayer's best interest. I have yet to see much of that around here in the last year. That's how I would differentiate myself over the last string of selectmen.
It's a hard question. I for the most part, don't think the selectmen have done a bad job. Like I've said, the town is doing relatively well compared to other towns. I mean, we have to. Every town, every city and town in Massachusetts is under the gun to more services, whatever it is, increasing costs. The town is the state is not funding transportation for regional school districts. The state is not giving the amount of money that they should for special education. Lots of things like that. And the towns and cities are under the gun. Compared to other towns, we're actually doing relatively well. Frank mentions that Groveland and Newbury are desirable weather, and West Newbury is not. Well, I always say, you know, when you go down Ash Street and you go 1 foot into Newbury, I hope you have good shocks on your car, because you immediately know that you've left West Newbury. West Newbury is taking care of things. I don't care if what Newbury hears it, better than Newbury is doing. Frank says he votes whether you know, philosophically probably we are relatively close, but for example, this was a pretty cold winter and extreme, you know, one of the coldest we've had in a while. And in the middle of February, we had a vote on whether to vote for a snow emergency. There was only 4 of us at the FinCom at that particular vote. So if the FinCom rejects the snow emergency, then if during that snow, in the next month, we had a whole month of winter ahead of us. There was no predicting whether we might have another snowstorm. Well, Frank voted against the snow emergency. If one other person on the FinCom had done that, it would have been a tie, and the streets might have not have got plowed. So I kind of think that's, I don't want to spend money on the snow either, but sometimes you have to. I thought that was an irresponsible vote.
Okay, do I get to address that?
Let's not attack.
He can attack all he wants. Let's address that vote right now. Okay, so that vote, and I'll be the first to state it, that it was an errant vote. I misunderstood what we were voting on, and immediately thereafter, I said something about it. Unfortunately, the meeting got adjourned before we can go ahead and take a revote. I wanted to take a revote on it. No one really pressed it. I just kind of let it die on the vine, and that was the end of it. I make errors. I'm sure you guys make errors. You're allowed to make errors.
We all
okay?
Thank you.
There's another point I'd like to address, and we've got to come back to this comments column. You know, Dave talks about this idea of presenting clarity to the taxpayer. Let's present clarity.
We're going to lose our audience, Frank. I'm sorry.
People need to know and not be misinformed.
Well,
Fair enough.
thank you.
There's the level of commitment.
Question to the audience.
Just one quick question. One of the things I think is important is communications. And the televising of the selectmen's meeting, I think, is an important piece. What action will you take to improve the quality of that so better communication gets out to the public?
If Glenn was here, he could speak to how many times I've already talked to him about this in the past. Yeah, it needs to improve. I don't know. It needs to improve. I mean, I haven't really gone high and hard really addressing Glenn consistently with this, but I mean, I had issues back when where I'm not getting the audio at the house. To Glenn's point, and it's a fair point, we had volunteer people for various reasons. It hadn't worked out. We don't have another volunteer. Maybe that needs to be better. Look, potentially, maybe this has got to be some sort of partially paid position. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I haven't taken it up with the selectmen, honestly. But, this may be a road we need to come down. Maybe we can't rely on volunteers. Maybe we're going to have some sort of multimedia position. The website doesn't work. The TV stuff sort of works. I mean,
What changed? It used to work.
it's before me.
We had a
I
group of volunteers, and people get tired, they get busy with their lives.
Yeah, look.
So maybe a paid position is not a bad
The
idea.
website used to work, and now you can't get
I mean, look, to the gentleman's point, the communications have got to improve. I mean, your point is well taken. I'm 100% and 110% in agreement with you. I don't have a clean answer for you right now, but it's got to get addressed. I mean, I've tried in my own ways. I mean, what I can say is if I end up being selectman, by my business being IT and being tech, I can potentially get my hands in, and will have the jurisdiction to get my hands in much more on the website and see if I can get some of that resolved, because the current process doesn't work whatsoever. The TV, that's a little bit of a different thing. I mean, I would need to work with Glenn on that.
I'm just wondering, I don't know, the state has given us some new rules that we're actually going to be addressing on town meeting about the money that the town receives from Verizon and Comcast. And it's a substantial amount of money per year, over $50K. Some of that has been used to purchase some of the equipment. To be honest, I don't know. And the state is a little bit in flux about when we can use it, how we can use it. So, but we can't use that money for something else. But if it could be used for a part-time person to run the cameras and stuff, I would certainly be in favor of that, yeah.
It is a weeknight. Does anybody else have any other questions? Jen has one, and then I have one, and then we'll kind of wrap this up.
Thanks, Jen. I just want to, first of all, say, in terms of cable access, as the Newbury reporter, you might want to talk to Newbury. They have actually a really good cable access program over there. But I feel it's important, before we leave tonight, to talk about the fact that on the annual warrant on Monday, there are 2 articles that are there because citizens cared deeply enough to petition the selectmen and put them on. And as a courtesy to those residents, I would like the candidates to let us know where they stand on those 2 articles, and if they don't support them, what they would suggest as an alternative to these citizens who care very passionately about this. And in your answer, I'm not looking for you to say you support the alternative sort of related articles that the selectmen put on. I'm talking more philosophically. Are you behind those concepts that the citizens brought forward? Thank you.
I'll take it quick to be. I support the concept of moving the town meeting to a Saturday. I don't see any. It seems like a win-win. We might get more. We might get more people with families. That don't want to go out at night. We might get more seniors that don't want to go out at night. It might don't have a problem with that at all. As far as the ferry park, the FinCom was in agreement on this, and we felt that we don't necessarily want to see anything built on the ferry park at the moment, but just it seems it's a very one-of-a-kind piece of property in the town, and there's very few public access areas to the river, basically. And I don't know how other people, but my own personal feeling is I would feel a little uncomfortable basically locking that piece of property up in perpetuity so that I don't know what someone 100 years from now might have some great idea that actually might be great for the town. And I would feel a little uncomfortable just basically totally locking it up forever. Like I say, someone 100 years from now might have a better idea than we do, and maybe that's because it's such a unique area of the town that's. But I'm not necessarily in favor of doing something on it without the town's permission at all. No, I want the town to evaluate things and perhaps do nothing. I just have a problem with completely locking the door and throwing away the key.
Yeah, I mean, Dave and I are pretty much aligned on this, as well as all of FinCom for that matter. As far as the move to Saturday, why not? If it doesn't work, we move it back. I mean, bottom line. There seems to be enough call for it. I don't know, I guess we don't have to go too far into it. The contingent who brought that forward, I don't know if it's going to have the intended consequences that they're anticipating, but I have nothing against it. Like I said, we try it. If it doesn't work, we move it back. I mean, I think it's a fine idea. As far as the parcel by Ferry, what is being called Ferry Park Landing or Ferry Park Landing or Ferry Park, the same parcel.
Ferry Landing Park.
Ferry Landing Park, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'm with Dave. I mean, basically, once we go ahead and put a conservation designation on that's stuck on there in perpetuity. And it's not only about that individual property, but it's all about around all the adjacent properties. And I mean, this ties back a little bit to what John McGrath was saying a little bit earlier about CPC funds, that, the initial ideal was a noble one, but now it's getting perverted for different use. I mean, it's not so thinly veiled that this is related to, the boat ramp project. And this isn't what this law should be used for. This isn't what this designation should be used for. So, regardless of that project, which I will not get into and I will not address, and that will come up when it comes up. I mean, for that individual parcel, I mean, I just don't see really any compelling reason on the merits of its own to lock that down as such.
Does anybody have a question? I have one last one that no one else has. There are plans to spend almost $2.6 million to update and create new fields. In the very near future, both the senior and the junior high schools will need substantial repairs. Any thoughts on that?
I mean,
do you mind? Can I get the whole question again? I'm sorry.
There's a plan, I believe it's gone before the school committee, to spend $2.6 million to upgrade the current fields and create new fields for the junior and senior high schools. But we're also going to be, in the very near future, going to need to be repairing both of those schools. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about spending $2.6 million on fields when we're going to have to be dealing with junior and senior high school kids. It's going out to bid.
I've seen the proposal. I'm actually in favor of it. The money is coming from different sources. It's not going to all be borrowed money. Some of it is the money that was held in escrow by the state from when Pentucket was had the financial problem. So approximately 500,000 has been sitting in sitting in a separate pot for several years. That's where 500 of the money is coming from. 700,000 of that was appropriated 2 or 3 years ago. The school committee and the towns approved that borrowing, and it turned out that that money was inadequate to fix the running track and the tennis courts, and so again, that money hasn't been utilized. So that's where some of the money is coming from. The other portion of the money is coming from user fees. Instead of reducing the user fees completely, which was the school committee and the superintendent's plan, was to eliminate the user fees for families with students doing sports. They proposed to cut them only 50%, and over the course of the years, over the course of the borrowing for this amount of money, that revenue stream coming in would support the bond issue to pay for these fields. I was concerned even that what happens if say we need to do something to the high school, even move the high school, or the high school needs to be repaired. Would these fields be, would they have to put construction trucks on the new fields, or would they have to go to, would the fields become obsolete even if the school moved to a different site? And the superintendent was of the complete opinion that he thought there was a very remote chance that the school system will ever move off of that site, and that they will be and they won't be impacted by any construction, if need be, which could take place in several years. I'm on board with it. When I find the interesting thing is if this is done, if the towns approve this, the students of the district will actually gain benefit of this almost immediately. It's a great boon for the students and the community as a whole. Everyone can use a running track. Everyone can use the tennis courts. They're not going to be isolated. And having I was actually on the track this afternoon, so I run on the track. The track is not usable for they haven't had any meets there in 10 years. It's falling apart, and it's a detriment to, again, we want to get new families to want to move to West Newbury, move to the Pentucket district. Well, having good facilities is one of those things. I'm going on too long, so I'll stop. And the future repairs to the school. If you could argue that say the 500,000 could be used for future repairs to the school, or but if you don't use that argument, then there's no reason to think that these school user fees would not be used, for example, to fix a cafeteria. That wouldn't be appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Dave did an excellent job answering that. I only have a couple of points that I just want to add to that. Like Dave, who was for it, I was also for the articles, but it was much more tepid, and really for some of the reasons that you brought up, the idea of potentially looking at a new school, or revamping the school, or needing to move off of that site. That was point number one when the superintendent came in, said, look, we're going to be dropping all this money. What happens in 7 years when we're going to need to move off of this? What's the cost benefit of doing this? And Dave got the same, we were at the same meeting, Dave got the same assurances I have, and You know, the superintendent talked to this one, that one, and whatnot, and was pretty confident we're not moving off of that site. I think it's also worth making note, yeah, the 2.6 is a high figure, but it is the high figure. I mean, really, the project is likely to come in lower than that. But that's the top side of that figure. Now, how much lower, that remains to be seen. Look, these things are always very difficult because, I mean, you need to project out with the best information you have, trusting other people with the best information they have 5, 10 years and whatnot out. One of the things that was real eye-opening for me, because initially I was right off the bat kind of inherently against it. I'm just not a fan of retrofitting. I'm more of a fan of doing new than doing retrofitting. Because like we're running into with the Page School, it's the gift that keeps on giving. There's going to be a retrofit, one thing after another. This is the nature of retrofits, all right? So off the bat, I was against it. And then I ended up talking to an awful lot of families. And it is a big point of contention to the point where it is, you know, the athletic facilities has been one of the drivers, if not the driver, why people send their kids elsewhere. It's no joke. Now, you know, I guess, I mean, I'm just not in that mindset yet. So, I mean, I got to get around that, get my head around that a little bit. But I definitely have to be respectful for what I'm hearing. And that wasn't 1 or 2 data points. That was a lot of data points. Also, there is some return to the point. What Dave said is, with doing the renovation of the fields, you know, part of the cost, I mean, I guess we do quite a bit of charging on the families in terms of fees for athletics. And that's part of the reason, because we need to ship all our athletes to other fields because our fields aren't up to code to basically host events for different types of sports. I don't know which ones, but, you know, I guess that's part of the problem. Well, a lot of that gets recaptured if we go ahead and redo the fields. We don't have to foot that bill, hence we can cut the fees, hence we have a small but incremental way to make it more attractive for families, which can't be dismissed because they're leaving in droves. So it's a tough one. Like I said, I mean, I'm tepidly in support of it, but give me that vote 10 times. I mean, I might support it 6 and not 4. I mean, it's tough. It's just tough.
I'd like to thank everybody, the candidates, for showing up tonight, giving everybody, and I'd like to thank the audience for putting up. And with that, I guess we'll say goodnight. Thank you all. Thank you.
Essex Bay.
Hi. I'm sorry, Marilyn? Hi, nice to meet you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, hi. Nice to meet you. Cam? Good job, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.